1 or 2 more minutes for people to be able to join, and we will start the webinar this morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our fourth webinar in the series of technology and innovation during the month of October. So we are halfway, 4 more to go, next week, Tuesday and Thursday, as well as the following week on the same days of the week. Just know that if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to submit them through the chat function, as we have done in all the previous sessions as well, and we'll be more than happy to handle them at the end of the presentation. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dan from Unlock Data, who will give us an overview of the services they provide. Dan, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Pascal. Let me share my screen. And go. Stop that video. Hi, thank you for having me, Pascal and the BATM. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. It's a small group, so if you have questions, then we'll have time at the end to answer them. So just as Pascal said, please add them on the chat box. Be pleased to spend a bit of time on that towards the end. Today, I think really want to, firstly, I guess you're people that you're listening to this, so I'm going to share some thoughts around how to use data well, and maybe some pitfalls that people fall into. Secondly, I want to talk about a bit about our products, some of the core things that we're doing with that. And thirdly, I thought it'd be helpful to leave you with 4 things that I think you can implement in 2021 to make your travel program better. Some of those things are certainly, I would say, straightforward, potentially. But the bit you can do something. So 3 things. We're going to start with a bit about me. So my name is Dan. I asked the team to put together a personal dashboard for me to tell you a bit about me, and also use it to explore a couple of data points. So this is my personal dashboard. I'm 43 years old. I've been married for 24 years. I've got 7 children, and I've gained 15 kilos during COVID lockdown. The reason I've done some of these things, why these in my KPI dashboard, let me show you the analysis underneath them. So I'm 43, I just founded a tech startup just at the very beginning of this year. And I read in the Harvard Business Review this analysis here, which showed that the optimal age to found a high growth startup is actually 45. And being that I'm 42 coming up 43, I thought this must be the perfect time to do a startup. What could go wrong? This is the perfect time to get going. I'm right in this age bracket. I should do this. Perfect timing, the most important KPI for deciding to do a startup. Second thing is I've been married for 24 years. If I can leave you with one tip as to how to live a long and successful marriage is don't eat margarine. This analysis here shows the very good 0.97 correlation between the divorce rate in the state of Maine and the per capita consumption of margarine. And you can see a very close trend here, almost exactly as we get through to these years, 2008, 2009, which I think proves that margarine and divorce are very inextricably linked. Don't eat margarine if you want to be married a long time. I have 7 children. Reason we did that, we did some research back in the early 2000s and found that this analysis here came from The Economist, it was published in The Economist, which showed that as countries get richer, the fertility rate falls. So poor countries have a high number of children, but it kind of reduces as the richer a country gets. But we get something called a J-curve, or a reverse J-curve in this instance. But this curve starts peaking back up again. So we thought, well, if it starts peaking back up as you have more children for richer countries, if I was to extrapolate this out back up to 7 again, then imagine how rich we could be if we had 7 children and were to apply this At the beginning of COVID, we had some life-changing things happen, obviously. What did I decide to do? I decided, having done some analysis, and this comes from the dose of jogging and long-term mortality study, which shows that the more jogging that you do, your risk of mortality goes up. I don't put myself at any more risk, so I decided I wouldn't do any jogging over lockdown, and as such, I've gained 15 kilos. So these things are all true, but I just want to talk a bit around how we've got to be careful with data. This is a pretty dashboard. Sometimes pretty dashboards can be created, but the actual underlying information is wrong or badly interpreted. And in this instance, this is actually quite an interesting statistic, but clearly, if you're going to do a startup, age is not a causational factor. Don't do a startup just because you're at a certain age. Perhaps don't be afraid to do it, but don't do it. There's lots of other things to think about. It's a lot of fun, but starting a travel tech business in the middle of COVID is not for the faint-hearted. Second mistake often I see is this concept where we get nice, good lines that match each other. And we start thinking, oh, that's interesting. That must be causational. One thing, there's a kind of classic data phrase, which is correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because margarine consumption in Maine back in the 2000s had some good relationship with consumption of margarine, those two things aren't linked. Don't worry about the thinking too hard about why margarine may be linked to marriage. It really isn't. It's just a statistic which looks good, but in actual fact has got no relevance whatsoever. It's not causational. In our dashboards, when we start creating things, be careful that we don't fall into the trap of seeing a correlation and thinking it's a causation and making decisions. I've got 7 children. I can promise you I'm not rich. If you want to be rich, don't have 7 children. That goes without saying, probably. And again, one of the errors we often find with data is that the human brain is very, very good at looking at patterns, finding patterns, and using those to predict the future. We've got to be very, very careful that we don't extrapolate a set of circumstances which is very precise here to do with countries and to do with overall fertility across a whole nation and the overall economic index of that nation. Do not extrapolate that and think that applies to my family and applies to me or in my circumstance. Clearly it doesn't. Equally, this chart doesn't go like this. It just doesn't work. It's just a hint of something, and we can often get carried away and start extrapolating data out. And we can be very narrow in our views sometimes when we look at data. We miss out the things that we don't want to examine. If I was to actually put a bar in here which said, what's the mortality rate of doing no exercise? It's actually very, very, very much higher than the mortality rate of doing some exercise. And there's a danger that you can kind of pick and choose some of the data points that you want to use or not be as robust in selecting or showing those. And we find lots of people use group the scale up or change a scale to logarithmic or something to try and make it look like the story they want to tell us. We've got to be very careful when we're doing this, that we've got some discipline around the way that we use data, and we're not just picking the things that kind of tell the story that we want to hear. So that was a kind of a bit of a fun introduction. You get to know a little bit about me, probably too much about me, to be honest, but it was a way just to explore a little bit around a few thoughts as you're doing your dashboards, whatever tools that you're using and however you're doing that behind the scenes. Just bear those things in mind. Don't extrapolate. Beware of causation, correlation, confusion. Think broadly about the context of your KPIs. If you're picking something that's too narrow, actually there's many more things that should be considered, and you maybe picked a wrong one here. And that will stand you in good stead, some good discipline for doing your dashboards and using data well. There you go, some free tips as by way of introduction of me. As Pascal said, I am the CEO and founder of Unlock Data. We're a group of, there's 5 of us at the moment. We're all ex-HRG. We came out of what was Amex at various times over the last 12 months, but formed together to make our own data company. because we recognise that we call ourselves unlock data because we think there's a lot of innovation that we can do around data to make travel better. For many organisations, they have a lot of data, and there's a phrase which we like to use, which is a well-known one, that if data is the oil of the 21st century. I think it's a useful phrase to think about the importance of data. But I recognise that for many organisations, most of that data is still locked up in the ground. It's never been excavated, it's never been extracted and put to good use. I think there's an opportunity to do more with the data that we've got to really turn that to decent economic use. And for the travel industry specifically, our kind of three things we focus on is how can we help you reduce the environmental impact of travel? That's one of our big focuses. How can we help you save money and reduce the financial cost of travel? And thirdly, we want to make sure that we always consider the human cost of travel. And we believe that those three things need to be constantly balanced up and thought about in total and not siloed off. So what did we decide to do when we started our business? We had some big plans. I'll talk about technology in a minute, but just the thing that we recognized was that for most travel data, it's a bit like an iceberg, a well-known analogy, but there's a bit that you see at the top, the bit we manage above the water. And that is managed very, very well, very productively. In fact, managed to within an inch of its life. It's we try and extract 0.05% savings off some of our deals and trying to do everything we can to drive the prices down. So we do a good job of managing what we see, but we often feel there's a huge opportunity to start looking under the water at the things that aren't seen. And we all know that booking leakage, so the bookings that don't go through the normal booking channel, is huge. You know, for hotels, it's the TMCs that we've worked with in the past. Typically, at best, get 60% of the hotels that their clients book. There's 40% which are booked outside of the TMC program. Big problem with booking leakage, particularly in these times where we want to make sure that we're looking after our travellers' duty of care and safety. That's not acceptable. Equally, we're working with a customer at the moment around their meeting spend, and they found on the back of COVID that they got inundated from their business with requests to cancel meetings and events. Well, they didn't know about these meetings and events. They were booked independently by PAs and people in the business contracted on behalf of the company. Cancellation fees they didn't know anything about. I think there's a real opportunity to do more in the meeting space, join up the data and really make more for managing that. And we've got to be more in these kind of events of kind of shining the light on meetings as to how we do that differently. And what data can we capture to make some good choices around meetings. There's massive data. I'm working with a company on private dining. If I look through the other tools, and there's an opportunity to see throughout the rest of that spectrum, 10% seeing opportunities, which will put eyes at the top part, but the same opportunity are significantly more. We don't see it. So our view is, how can we help you to get some visibility of that data to manage it more effectively? And importantly, that's going to save you money, absolutely. It's going to reduce risk. I think that's something we need to be really aware of at the moment. How do we reduce the risk around travel? That's what we're thinking about all the time in terms of the health of our travellers. We need some visibility of what they're doing to be able to manage that risk appropriately and manage their risk on behalf of the company. We do a lot of work on sustainability and environmental impact of travel. The areas that we focus on, seeing air and the SND very well managed. And it's often a hard part to reduce. If you've got to fly somewhere, you've got to fly somewhere. It's hard to really make good choices to bring your environmental impact down. But there's lots of things around that, below the surface, where you can help people make better choices that reduce impact on the environment. I think if we focus on these things, improve our traveller experience, we can manage more of these things, then we can actually make sure that our travellers travel better and get more out of their trips and get a better return. So we kind of want to focus on these things, and with some technology ground up that helps to do that. So the first thing we built was a interactive web application. That's what this is here, as an example. It's brand new. This kind of was launched to use the web applications been around a while. What we used was launched by Microsoft in May 2020, so it's brand new, but enables us to do much more in browser than we ever could before. The world of internet browsers has been progressing significantly, particularly as the web standards have come out. So Google and Apple and Mozilla and Microsoft have got together and standardized the way that they look, which means that for us who want to build applications inside the browser, it means that we build it once, it works everywhere, which is obviously makes it much more appealing, but also has enabled us to do much more in the browser than we ever could, which means that if you're doing work in your browser rather than all the work happening up in the cloud, then we're not going backwards and forwards with the internet connection, which is just keep things in browser. It means there's real speed for the users. So we've built a web app. I'll show you how that is, how that works. And we also use containers. Containers are another pretty new technology, but being much widely adopted in the banking industry. The way that container works is that we dock our container, and then we start taking data feeds into the container. So that can be transient bookings from your TMC or DS, meeting data, email states, any other data sources that you have available, API, or just connect directly into, or even if you've got a CSV file, expense, credit card, we can bring that in. The data goes into our machine, we manage that process. We do the transformation of duplicating, cleansing out, doing all the mathematics, kind of turn it into something useful. And then the way it works is that data is then pushed back into the application. So that's a one-off activity for every change. The data gets pushed in, and then from then on, the data lives in the application, so that the speed is really there. So what's kind of interesting is that this is probably a fairly familiar, or at least the thought of it would be familiar, of extracting the data in, transforming it, and loading it in. That's a fairly well-known way of working. The interesting bit with us is because that's all done inside a container. The container can be hosted in different places. If the data is small enough, that data can all be housed inside the browser, and all of the work happens in the browser. So you can set up the API in the browser, the data doesn't go anywhere, it stays in the browser, there's no connections outside of the browser. You can be offline and it still works because the application lives inside the browser. No software to download because you've probably already got a browser. So it's if you're kind of smallish client spend, then we can run everything in browser, which means we can set you up in moments, and you've got some of the tools that we'll show you today. Really new, really interesting. Love to show you more about that in a moment. But for most of our larger clients, and when we work with TMCs directly, we host the data on the client side. So we push the container with all of our algorithms and tools, gets pushed out to the client side. So the local IT team has to just give us a port, open up Docker, and very, very safe. And within moments, you can dock our container into their environment, which means that everything runs client side. We don't see our customer data. So both of these two instances, we can give you full online reporting solutions without us ever seeing the data and without the data ever leaving your systems. So from a kind of GDPR security perspective, I've just a massive question for a big government client, of which most of it was not applicable because we don't see your data. It's kind of it's very liberating for me because I don't have to worry about penetration testing or getting hacked or anything. It makes life straightforward, but it means, and that does mean it's lower cost because of that, and simple to implement. For some people don't like those options and prefer us to host in a traditional cloud environment, which we can do. Not our preferred option. We prefer this or this, but we can do that if dealing with your internal IT teams is too problematic. So that's kind of conceptually what we do. We think there's a real opportunity to join data together, bring your travel data into one space. It will save you time from doing any consolidation backends. It will definitely save you money from that long tail spend of opportunity out there. It gives you freedom to book where you want. One of the things that we've been doing is taking direct connects from hotels or from airlines directly. So if you want to book with your a carrier which isn't covered by your TMC, or you want to have direct booking channel with them, we'll still consolidate the data back end, which gives you a real freedom to manage your program, and we help you manage your entire environmental impact. So that's kind of what we've been doing. To do that project is probably more straightforward than you think. Technology has moved a long way in the recent years with the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Probably more straightforward than you may have thought, and certainly I would guess we are less expensive than you would imagine to do that kind of process. And we have a range of prices from whether you're a small business right through to a large business. The pricing means that there's an access point for everybody. And I would really encourage you, if you were to do one big thing this year to move your travel program forward, I think that's a really powerful thing to do in 2021, to put onto the table to really manage your entire spend. But I know for many people, that kind of project might not be their most urgent thing right now. But equally, I think there's opportunities to do stuff with data that you've got, maybe things that you could go back and do yourselves. So I'm going to show my tool a little bit, but I'm going to do it in the context of telling you some stories and giving you some advice for things that you use our tools for if you like, but you can also go off and do on your own. The kind of subheading I put forward for this was that data shouldn't be difficult. And I guess that you guys who are attending probably are familiar and good at using data, but also want to kind of debunk some of the myths. Sometimes people like to make things complex, and I like to try and make things simple. So I'm going to try and give you some simple things that you could do to make your travel program better in 2021, which I think you could take home and start working on immediately. So the first thing I wanted just to cover is how can you empower your travelers to make good decisions about the environment and about sustainability as they go back for 2021, as they start traveling again. And just going to start off at this point, really. So my second eldest son plays college football at Yale in the US. We took the whole family over in November last year to watch the big game, which is the they call it the game. It's the Harvard-Yale end of season close. All the Harvard-Yale alumni gather, sort of 70,000 people, big social event, nationally televised. And it's all the rich people from New England get together for a day of drinking and watching football sometimes. So this game, this last year, half time comes along, and the field is stormed by several hundred students from both the Harvard and Yale teams who had organised a sit-in to delay the start of the game. They were protesting about the lack of urgency shown by the two universities in relation to climate change. And they were loud and disruptive. They held the game up for over an hour, or maybe even an hour and a half, and it was getting dark, and they weren't sure if we could cancel the whole thing. They wouldn't move when they were asked to move, and in the end, they started getting arrested. I think 42 ended up in court and being arrested for not leaving. And it's an interesting experience to be there in the stands watching this, and obviously we had a vested interest with our son playing. But it was interesting that in the crowd, an older generation, business leaders, wealthy people, were on the sideline booing and criticising those kids there for their lack of manners, or impoliteness for holding up their football game. And meanwhile, these kids are risking their careers, risking being expelled by the university, risking police action by storming the field and doing this. And just a stark reminder, as we're thinking around sustainability, sometimes we've got to balance up interests within our organisation, because there's going to be some people in your organisation who are the people in the crowds who just think these kids need to go and get a proper job and stop messing around. there's a danger that you miss the urgency. These Harvard Yale undergraduates, they're going to be the business leaders of the future. We need to take their views seriously. And as we bring these talented young people into our organizations, we need to grasp the urgency with which they're taking this situation, the risk they're prepared to take, how much they care about it. And it's just that whole situation, the contrast really was what really stuck with me. So one of the things we kind of came back with and thought, how can I start empowering individual travelers to give them the information they need to make good decisions about their travel from a carbon perspective? So one of the things we built, something we call it UNA. It's our individual traveler dashboard. And the thought being that, say, for each individual traveler, we could have a look. What did you used to do? Let's have a look at your historic spend. This is a bit of a test that we built for a certain customer, but it would be customized for your business. But the thinking behind it is that what did your spend used to look like? I mean, 2020 is a write-off. 2019, what did you used to do as a frequent traveler? What was your trip pattern like? And then to start thinking about what could you change in 2021? Obviously, your type of travel is going to change. You're going to travel less, probably, or maybe not. Maybe it's a different shape. And maybe you want to travel a different class or a different locations and be more short haul and less long haul. Maybe you switch more from air to rail or from ground transportation to rail. The crucial thing is how much, and maybe there's so much. What we're trying to do here, and it's not to say these are all metrics, but trying to give some metrics to a customer, to a traveller, with different views about the environmental impact of travel, but giving them the tools to play to start looking at the impact that their decisions about their travel are having on their carbon. Because it's quite hard to make carbon change from top down sometimes because of those different views and opinions. And we're asking people to travel, but we need to give them with the right information to make the good decisions around that. It can't all be done through policy. Some of it's just done through the individual traveller decision making, and it's hard to replicate all of that from the top down. Our view is how do we give information from the bottom up to help them make good decisions about travel? We've kind of created this with a forecast, so you can kind of this what does it look like 2021. If you had 100 people to complete it, say, and submit the forecast, you have a good idea. And we want to try and create some ways to track this on an ongoing basis as well, so you can see how they're doing. Provide some relevant tips based on what they've decided that they've done to try and give them some thoughts around how and communication as to how to travel better in 2021. So the concept of this is a good one. This is one way of doing it, but there are ways of doing it. Maybe essentially lower tech, or just giving some kind of a simple dashboard, or just a couple of scenarios for travellers as they're thinking about 2021. If they want to, and as they increasingly want to take sustainability seriously, give them information, make choices. There's lots of bad information that are dodgy KPIs, so you can be in control of that. At this point, empower your travellers to make decisions about travel. Second thing we cover is about actionable data. That phrase is pretty well worn in the travel industry. Data, what does that mean? I'll tell you a very quick story. I'll try and make it quick. So I like this guy here. This is Wikipedia. Simple was born in the middle of the 19th century. There were his parents. He grew up in Buda, very wealthy family, grocers, and were doing well. Yes, there's a picture of him as a boy here. He went off to university in Vienna. Probably a bit like a lot of us, didn't quite know what he wanted to do. Started studying law and ended up being medicine in the 19th century was a funny time where people were more under the Greek, full humours, and movies. It wasn't something as nowadays, almost rather than scientists. Because no one decided to be a doctor. She wanted to hear jobs in but unsuccessful. Ends up taking a role at the hospital at the division. So in the 19th century, with poverty and were children being killed as a result of the so people set up these charity hospitals around Europe to try and help this situation, ease the pain, and give some free hospital care for women to give birth to their children for free. But the trade-off was that you'd have doctors working in there to kind of help them get trained up. So Semmelweis took a job at Vienna Hospital. They got two maternity clinics. One of those clinics is staffed predominantly by doctors, and the other one is staffed predominantly by midwives. And they take ladies in labour on alternate days. So Monday you go into the doctor's one, and Tuesday you go into the midwife one, etc., and kind of changing it up. Now, all the women in Vienna knew that they wanted to give birth on one of the days where it was the midwife hospital, not the doctor's hospital or the clinic. The reason being that the outcomes, the likelihood of surviving a birth in the midwife clinic was significantly higher. There was this a common problem of infection, and they called it childbed fever, which was rife anyway, but and it's still a risk today. But this infection, which was killing significant proportions of women, but they knew that it was more in the doctor's hospital. So women would kind of give birth on the street rather than go into the doctor's hospital or bang on the door of the midwife hospital to get let in that one, and or even give birth on the way to the hospital so they could potentially try and get in over the curfew and get into the next day's one. Semmelweis takes the job, and he sees this problem, and he starts tracking the data. And he sees very, very clearly that the first clinic, the doctor's clinic, has a significantly higher death rate than the midwife clinic, the second clinic. And this kind of is puzzling, a bit confusing, and he starts to kind of do some analysis. What could it possibly be? They get admitted on alternate days, so we kind of controlling for that factor. They start trying to kind of look at measuring the temperature in both the clinics, measuring the amount of airflow, and trying to make sure the windows were open in the same way. Just trying to work out what it could be across those two things. And then in 1846, one of Semmelweis's friends in the hospital, another doctor, dies very suddenly, with symptoms very similar to the childbed fever that the ladies were dying of in the maternity clinic. And he kind of was thinking about his friend, and his friend was in an autopsy a few days before he died, and got nicked by a scalpel with one of his students that he was training up. Just got a nick, turned into infection, and in a few days he's dead. And Semmelweis is thinking, there might be something in this. I don't quite know what, but there's something in this. So he came up with the idea that the doctors, maybe when they're touching the dead bodies, there was something that he called cadaverous particles, something on the body of the dead people that got onto the surgeons and the doctors, which then somehow transferred onto the ladies. At this time, medicine wasn't like that. But he thought, this is interesting. I'm going to try this experiment. He got some chlorine, some lime wash, kind of chlorine-based, and he started instituting hand washing for the doctors before they went between the autopsies and the mortuary and the maternity ward. They had to wash their hands. What happened? Well, this is the death rate per month in the years leading up to this. He does this in 1847, and immediately the death rate drops. So it's below 5% from then on, with some months that are down at 0%. What a great result. Phenomenal. Well done, Semmelweis. Good scientific method, good thinking. But unfortunately for Semmelweis, the world wasn't ready to hear his news. So he publishes it with great enthusiasm and waits for the accolades to flow in. Instead, he gets ridiculed. He has offended society. In those days, doctors were only gentlemen. You had to be rich to go to university. You were a gentleman. The idea that a gentleman would have dirty hands was considered offensive, an insult. How dare you say this? We are gentlemen. They started tearing apart his research, saying, you know, it doesn't make any sense. You've missed the point. Oh, what about this? What about that? Tore him apart, and he was lampooned. And very quickly, they fired him. He lost his job. And he had to move back to Budapest, left Vienna. He carried on trying to do his research, trying to test in more places. Well, this is him and his wife. Tried it in another hospital in Budapest, in Hungary, finds the same thing. Same thing happens. We introduced the hand washing, and then he started hand washing the implements as well, the samples and things, and even better impact. It definitely works. But still, he's publishing his research. No one believes him. He gets more and more angry, frustrated. No one listening to him. People calling him mad. And then as he's kind of writing angry letters to the world out of his house in Budapest, one day one of his friends say, "Oh, look, we found something interesting at the hospital. Come and see." So he goes and visits a hospital. Turns out it was an asylum, a lunatic asylum, and he was. His wife was complicit in getting him there. They take him, they grab him, they put him in a straitjacket, and he gets admitted to the lunatic asylum, where he was beaten. As a result of the beating, he had a cut on his hand. He got an infection and he died. At his funeral, there's just a handful of people. You know, the guy dies, a laughing stock. 20 years later, Louis Pasteur comes along, starts finding out under microscopes and finding out about germ theory. Oh, it turns out that he was right all along. It doesn't matter when we wash our hands, as we get told frequently these days, the importance of hand washing and cleanliness. The idea that germs can pass from one person to another person was ridiculed 20 years earlier, and 20 years later is adopted as science. Good news is, for Semmelweis, like after his death, he's now been revered. This is his house that he lived in Vienna. I think that was in Budapest, turned into a museum. There's euro coins with his face on them. He's got hospitals named after him. Statues all over the place in Vienna and in Hungary, in tribute to this man who is considered one of the founders of hygiene in hospitals and of germ theory, and his research was considered very, very important in moving medicine forward. So a long story, but one of my favorite ones. Just interesting to me that this guy Semmelweis was applying some good maths, some good data, but failed to make the change. Didn't take anyone with him on that journey. Wasn't able to make that a reality, or to implement anything different within his that had a lasting impact, or the impact it could have had at that time. Many thousands of women died unnecessarily had he managed to convince people that his data was right. And I think that's something we all have to take seriously with AI, clearly not often with that kind of impact. But the idea that our data analysis can get lost is something that we need to be really mindful of. And that comes down to how we present it. If it doesn't look right, people are going to get turned off. And how we present our journey of getting somewhere. And we take that seriously and think about that a lot with some of the things that we build. And we try to kind of take this idea, this is of kind of how you go from what. So so kind of a KPIs are, I think, very, very important by managing a business. How do I go from the what through to the so what? Okay, so taking me on this journey of discovery through to the now what, or what am I going to change? And I think it's something that you guys can be thinking about in terms of your program going forwards, of this journey from the what to the so what to now. How do you make it actionable? Some of the things that we do on our tools is to say, I'll take climate change as an example. So if I was to, this is a UK domestic business. They do a lot of travel between Manchester and Southampton, which is two places that either end of England. You can get a train there, but this company chooses to fly. if they were to move 70% of their bookings from air to rail, they'd save 60 months under carbon. It would cost them more money, because I'm saying that you probably can't do it in a day. It's quite a long train ride, and it's going to take you a lot more hours. But it's that kind of, this is interesting. So I'm not telling you what to do here. And maybe as a trial manager for your budget holders or for your business, you might not be telling them what to do. What can you commit to within the business? What would be a good number that we could do? One of the things that we talk about, and I've read some good books around habit forming here, like how do you, in psychology, how do you create a commitment? How do you make a commitment to change? In small actions that say, yes, I like this scenario, I'm going to add that to my business plan. I'll skip around a bit. That could cover all sorts of things, but say I'm going to book my rail tickets early. This company does a lot of rail, so I'm getting this big savings number here if I book my rail tickets early. Maybe I'm going to book my preferred hotel program. Just doing certain examples. Do that, and then again I'll click add to business plan on some of those. So doing that, so that I can then come to this now what part, and then can we turn it into a plan? So these are my new travel levels as I played with. These are the actions that we want to take and turn that into an action plan. So we've taken something which started off as a bit of data. We've taken it through some scenarios. Okay, I like that. I could probably do that, and turn that into a plan. I think that thought process around, and then monitoring that plan on an ongoing basis, did we achieve it? How did we do against it? I think it's a very powerful way of turning your data into action. That what's what now what is a really nice way of thinking about it, and we find that's very powerful in terms of driving change. Last couple of things to go through. What's about scenario planning? So we built a forecast tool, tried to launch it earlier in the year around trying to forecast 2021 data. And the feedback we got from our big clients was that they found forecasting a bit uncomfortable because who knows what's going to happen in 2021. And you know, putting your name to a forecast which is going to be wrong is actually kind of a little bit impactful, and I'm not sure I feel comfortable. I don't know. So you know, I'm going to look stupid. There's only two types of forecasts. You're either lucky or you're wrong. We don't know what 2021 is going to look like. It's impossible to know at the moment. There's so much uncertainty around. But in uncertainty, the way to tackle thinking about 2021, I'd encourage everyone to do this, is to run some scenarios. So those scenarios could be very broad, and the way that we approach it, I've left it up here, is to start thinking around, start off with 2019 or a good 12-month back period that you've got. So maybe start in January or in December or whatever, a good period, 12 months, doesn't matter if it's not your financial year, just try and get yourself a good data set. Should be fairly easy to get your hands on a summary Excel version you can play with, and then start thinking, what do you know? Like, I know that some of my offices aren't going to open until January, February, March. That might be it. Or I know that actually we aren't going to be traveling to Latin America at any time next year. We're just going to write that off. So you can start in anything you start adding to 2020. So I can strip out any travel out of, or people going internally to my London office. I'm going to take that out because actually London's not going to be open, so no one's going to travel there for internal purposes. That's something you can remove from your forecast data. And I know that we're not going to Latin America, so I can take any people going to Latin America. I'll take that out of my back data. And you start, if we were sort of feeling pessimistic or we're optimistic, we go back to normal within 12 months, or we're actually going to say the whole year is going to be written off, we're not going to do very much. We're going to change some of our policies around, and we think the FAs are going to change. I think the point is not to make it overly complex, and it's definitely not to make it right. The point is to give yourself a broad set of scenarios that say, at one extreme, vaccination comes in, we're back to traveling normally. I want to predict back up to the last 6 months of the year going to be the same as 2019, but prices are going to be up as well because demand's going to drive up. That's kind of one extreme. Am I ready for that one extreme? What does that mean in terms of where my travellers are going to be? What does that mean in terms of my supplier deals? What does that mean in terms of my budgets, and what do I have to tell finance is going to happen? So thinking about those kind of things from a one spectrum, get your head straight into that. Then the other end of the spectrum is actually there's going to be no travel. We're not going to go anywhere. It's all written off, or a little bit of domestic, maybe in the back half a year. Prices are falling through the floor because everyone's desperate to get their planes filled. So you can kind of model the other extremes. You think, okay, so what do I have to tell my travellers? What do I tell my suppliers? What do I tell finance? And then you start working it and put a few in the middle. And the thought process isn't to average it out. That's not the point. The point is to just make sure that you've prepared for each of those circumstances in advance. You've got your head straight. You've got a range of numbers that you can share with the business, because no one's going to be right. You can sit down with your supplier and say, this is the ranges we're thinking. This is what we know. So we've incorporated what we know today, and then you keep refreshing that as you know more. But the whole point, I think it's very powerful. And I think I'll put my book away. A book called Scenario Analysis, which is just a very practical guide to doing that. I think the slides are going to be published, and I'll put a screenshot on because I wanted to hold it up, but I've left it in my bookcase. But it's just a good way, practical guide. It's a thin book, things that you can do. I think the modelling, don't make the modelling so complicated that you get stuck, because it's not about getting it right. It's about doing something to be prepared. The worst thing, I think, is to sit there and you say, what's 2021 going to look like? And we're now 2 months away, and the answer is, I don't know. You just don't want to be in that place anymore. I think you need to have some ranges that you're thinking about, and suddenly you look like the smartest guy in the room. And I think that's kind of within your gift. We've got a tool. It's easy to use. You can put your data in. We're doing that free for a limited number of customers if you wanted to have a play with it. But equally, or not equally, I'd say alternatively, you could do it yourself. And I don't think it needs to be rocket science, but at least you've got an idea. The last thing that I wanted to cover was you measure what you value, and you value what you measure. So when you're thinking about your KPIs and thinking about what you show your business around your spend, whatever that might look like, I think it's important that you cover, that you think about what you measure, because it's very easy to get stuck on rather bland KPIs. The average ticket price was this. Okay, doesn't tell me anything. So what am I supposed to do? One of the things that we encourage people to think about is kind of well-being. And you saw on that carbon analysis, I think I'll just go back to that a second, here, is to say actually there's always human impact on decisions that we make. If I take this train journey, which is 5 hours rather than a 1 hour flight, yeah, I've saved the environment, but I've been away a night. And we've got a lot of travellers who are out on the road, 850 more 1 hours more travel time. There's a well-being impact to that. And I think I'd encourage you to start doing some well-being analytics. Doesn't have to be rocket science, and it definitely isn't going to be right, because we're just applying some rather crude data to think about something which is rather, it's very difficult to measure accurately, or kind of from a kind of how do you feel starts kind of, it doesn't lend itself to like a financial measure that we're used to. But not to say sentiment analysis isn't very, very good, and I think we should do more of it in terms of get your finger on the pulse of your travellers. But even things like, you could go out there today and say, well, who are my top 20 travellers? How many nights have they done in the past? How many flights have they done? How many times have they been away? How many trips? What's their kind of, and then come up with some kind of risk factor, weight it, come up with a risk factor. I say it's not about being right, it's about tracking over time to see what's happening. Are you putting more stress on your employees on average over time? As you go back to travel in 2021, are you putting more stress on them than before? And are we trending in the right kind of direction for what the business values? And I think there's lots of good evidence around how time and money invested in well-being it's got a multiple times return on investment. Your organisation will be taking this seriously. If nothing else, this pandemic has got us thinking about health and travel in a different way, potentially, than we have for a while. I think there's an opportunity for you to do some more measuring around that. Bring some KPIs in. Start getting your organisation to think about it. And I would say with it, sometimes I talk to people and they get a bit stuck. Because it's hard, it's just, am I doing the right thing? Am I right? And I think my confidence I try and give you is to say it doesn't matter. The important thing is we're measuring it, and we're tracking it, and we're seeing, we're looking at the direction. Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Or how, and then incorporate some sentiment analysis. Well, what's the impact on how people are feeling? Let's have a look at the kind of a mind map of how people are doing. What kind of responses we're getting back. The important thing is it's on the agenda, because no one makes any decisions, and they certainly won't going forwards, that is just financial. I think very few people make decisions which are just about sustainability, because you won't go anywhere. You know, that's the best way not to cause damage to the environment. No one makes it just on those things. And it's always a balance of the human impact as well. So in your analytics, make sure, like I've kind of done here, and I think this is an easy thing that you can introduce, that you just look at your carbon, absolutely growing in importance, give the decision-making power to the data to the decision makers. Always spend, it's never going to go away. It's kind of what a lot of us are paid on the basis of. Make sure we're measuring some human impact of what we're changing, and how we're managing travel. So I came up with this in an acronym. Easy. Data shouldn't be difficult. 4 things, not necessarily easy, but I think within your gift that you could do to implement in your travel program in 2021. Giving you a bit of a flavour of our tool, some of the exciting things that we're doing here. This is give you a feel what it looks like. It's pretty, it works well. We know travel. We've been around it for a long time, and I think I'll take some questions, but if you want to email me or telephone me, that's my details. Thank you very much for your time today. Look forward to taking any questions now. And otherwise, then get in touch if you want to know some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for that presentation. Very insightful. I have not yet received any questions, so for the people on the line following, if you have any questions, we'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes. Feel free to submit them in the chat function. In the meantime, I might just have one question for you, Dan. It's something I've asked to all the previous panelists that we had, or presenters that we had in the previous webinars. From an implementation perspective, what's the time frame that a company needs to think about? And I know, as you said in your presentation, for one of the models you have, it's pretty straightforward. But in general, how long does an implementation process take within Unlock Data?
Yeah, so I kind of, it was one of our foundation blocks was thinking about implementation. So I always felt it was slightly strange that, and I've worked in travel technology for a long time, but we tend to quote months for implementations. So I'm sure most of the people that you've asked, the answers ended in months. And I feel like we've got to try and get a bit smarter around this. When we're buying other technology, it doesn't take months. So we've worked, we call our implementation process unboxing. I don't know if that translates very well, but that kind of feeling of opening a present, you get a new iPhone or something, you open it up, oh man, this is a good experience. So we call it unboxing, and we're really challenging ourselves to make that process as simple as possible. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're at the smaller end, we're trying to make that literally a few steps that can kind of get you going within a couple of days. We have to set you up as a user, so depending on what day of the week you ask, we've got to set you up. But really, it's days for that bottom end. If you want the COVID forecaster, you've got your TMC data handy. We can plug that in, get you set up, and you'll be up and running as quickly as it takes to get you logged in. So that's that one end of the spectrum, and then the other end of the spectrum, it kind of depends a little bit around how much you want to do. So we price based on the number of data feeds that are coming in. So if you just got your TMC data in and nothing else, then really it's days again, depending on how you want to host it. If you want, you want an expense, I want my credit card, I want my service department. So I've got a direct deal with Lufthansa. I've got a Hilton deal. I want to have that incorporated. I've got my private dining plan over here. More things you do, kind of, adds complexity, and depends if you've done it before. So if it's a brand new one, we'd have to build it. So I think we're going from days through to a couple of weeks, and then I'd always say start small and build up. We don't have to kill everything in one go. We'll get something set you up in a few weeks, get your TMC data in, get your credit card data in. We know what they look like, they're easy. And then over time, we can bring some other things in. So it keeps the price down nice and low for you, keeps implementation quick. and then we can tackle some of the more difficult stuff down the line.
Okay, perfect. And we received one question. Is there a possibility to customize the tool?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you want that quick out the box in 2 days, no, I'm not customized. But we recognise for most large, medium and large customers, we expect some customization. So for the middle size, we kind of customize 2 dashboards for them. For the large size, everything's customized. But yeah, it's very easy for us to customize this. And what the hard bit's actually the data management part. The visualization is fairly easy to customize. So absolutely. For the real quick stuff, which I think is a real good argument for saying we've already thought about this, we know what you want, you can probably get up and running quickly. There's a kind of a good case for saying go with the standards and customize it later. At least gets you started. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, we are 1 minute away from the full hour, so well done from a timing perspective. Again, I want to thank you, Dan, for joining us this morning. We will obviously also post a recording for those who were not able to join us this morning in person. For all those who joined, I want to thank you for your time this morning. Just remember, we have another one coming up next Tuesday and next Thursday, as well as the following week. Hope to see you all there. Stay safe and talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.